Hello, welcome to Suzuki's hints and tips video about outboard maintenance. Suzuki have been producing outboard engines now for over 50 years, and we now have a current range of four-stroke units, exclusively four-stroke units, from the smallest 2.5 horsepower single-cylinder engine up to the flagship V6 300 horsepower unit. The engines themselves can be divided into two basic categories. The ones we're going to be talking about in this video are the portable engines. That's the singles, twins, and the lightweight three-cylinder engines between 2.5 horsepower and 30 horsepower. The engines we have here today are the smallest one, the 2.5 horsepower, and we also have a 15 horsepower twin-cylinder engine here to demonstrate the differences between these. These are two generic types of engine, and the features of these engines are typical for the smaller range of engines that we do. Suzuki is very proud of its heritage with marine engines. Suzuki's name is synonymous with reliability, quality, performance and fuel economy. But these things can only be guaranteed when the customer accepts that maintenance is very important. Buying a marine engine is one thing, but looking after it is extremely important to make sure it performs properly. So what I'm going to be talking about are some of the basic things that owners can do to make sure that that engine remains reliable. These engines, certainly we would like to see you take to your dealer to be serviced, to be maintained, but it's essential that you are aware that there are certain things that need to be done to be checked on a regular basis to make sure that engine keeps running properly. Things such as the oil in the engine to lubricate it. Some of the engines, it's more obvious to see. This little engine here, this 2.5 horsepower, for example, has a little window on the side of the engine to show oil level. Others may not have. Others will have a dipstick. To remove the cover from this engine, it's necessary to pull the start cord out a certain amount to give you some available movement on the cover. Remove the rubber latches front and back and lift the cover up. That will give you access to the engine, the fuel tank, and so on. This engine has a little fuel tank here that you can see. It doesn't hold a lot of fuel. If the owner doesn't use the engine particularly often, if it's, for example, bad weather in the summer, the engine might not be used hardly at all. The danger is that the fuel in here can lose its qualities over a period of time. So it's important that should be borne in mind. As with all small engines, also with carburetor-fed engines such as this one, there's also danger that fuel in the carburetor can evaporate, leaving varnish, residues behind in the very tiny jets which are used for fuel and air flowing through the carburetor. That will make the engine difficult to start and may affect the performance as well. So it's always important to bear in mind the quality of the fuel that's in there. This engine is an entirely portable engine, and therefore it is always important that the vent on top of the fuel tank is closed when the engine is transported. For normal running, the vent is opened by turning it anti-clockwise. So that the engine runs correctly, the fuel can go through to the carburetor. When you transport the engine to avoid spillage of fuel and of course the potential for fire, this vent should be screwed down tight like that before the engine is laid on its side. To transport this engine, it's important that the fuel is switched off and that the engine is laid on its side such that this label is uppermost. To remove the cowl from the 15 and the 20 horsepower engines, there is a latch at the front. Undo that, lift up the cowl, pull the start cord out slightly and relieve the cowl at the back and take it off. Underneath we can see the engine here. This is a very modern unit. It benefits from fuel injection, but the fuel injection system is designed not to use a battery. It's a battery-less system. It's self-contained. Even though some versions have electric starters and have a battery to power that, the fuel injection system is always battery-less. So even if you had a completely flat battery, as long as you have a start cord, you should better start the engine. Your engine will be supplied to you with oil in the sump, but it's important that you keep an eye on the oil level. We recommend that you use oil such as this, Motul marine oil. In this particular engine, there is a very obvious filler cap here to put oil into it. Don't overfill the engine. There is a dipstick on all of our engines to show you the actual level that's in there. All of our engines are, of course, water cooled. The water, whether it's seawater or fresh water, depends where it's used, will be drawn up through the leg, through the pump here at the bottom of the leg, and force through the engine to cool it, and then back out through the leg at the bottom there. So it's always essential that owners are aware that the cooling system is dependent on a good flow of water through the engine. Because of the environment in which outboard engines are used, it's important to prevent corrosion of the engine externally and internally. This is achieved by the use of anodes, such as this one here. There are also anodes on the rest of the unit as well. It will depend on the model and the size of the engine as to how many anodes are used. The point of anodes is that they are designed to corrode in preference to the engine. All manufacturers use them, and it's also important that dealers recognize that they must be replaced on a regular basis. Once they start to corrode to more than 2/3 of their size, then they should be replaced by the dealer. They're very cheap, but it's worth having these looked at to protect your engine. One of the most important parts of your engine is the kill cord. This cord could save your life. The other part of the cord is attached to your belt, and this is attached to the kill switch just here. If you are unfortunate enough to fall overboard, this will pull out and kill the engine. It's always worth keeping a spare kill cord on board. As you can see, this end of the cord has a latch. This should be attached to your belt, although the RYA do recommend that it is put around your thigh. Whichever case, it should be part of your person, and the other end should be connected, of course, into the kill switch. An important part of regular maintenance is to make sure that certain parts of the engine are greased to prevent seizure. An example might be these thumb screw fixings here onto the transom. We recommend the use of a water-resistant grease, as it has the particular properties necessary for marine use. As a part of regular maintenance, it's important to keep both the external and the internal of the engine clean. The external is achieved by just washing down using a hose with fresh water. But of great importance is making sure that the inside of the engine is clean and doesn't have salt debris, mud or silt inside the engine. This is achieved by using this flushing point on the side of the engine. It's a plastic plug which you unscrew. Inside, the thread is for a standard garden hose fitting. Connect the garden hose to it and flush water through. Make sure, of course, that the engine is not running when you do this. If you do run the engine, then you will damage the water pump down here. Once the engine has been flushed for a few minutes, remove the garden hose and refit the plug. As part of routine maintenance, it's important that you look at the propeller from time to time. The propeller is a very vulnerable part of the engine, and occasionally things can go wrong in this area. Typically, such things as fishing line becoming caught between the propeller and the gearbox. You may think that's nothing particularly dangerous, but what can happen is that the line can find its way past the seal into the gearbox, causing water to enter the gearbox. So it's important that you, if you see that, to remove the propeller as soon as possible and clear the obstruction. The first thing, of course, is to make sure that the engine is switched off. Propellers are dangerous things when they're rotating. Make sure the engine is switched off completely. To be able to undo this brass nut here, the propeller has to be locked in position. So the best thing to do is to put a large block of wood in between the blade and the anti-cavitation plate here. Remove the split pin and then remove the brass nut with a suitable spanner or socket. Once that's removed, the whole propeller will slide off the shaft very easily. To replace it, put it straight back again, having cleared the obstruction, put the nut back on again, torque it up to a good setting. There will be a specification in the owner's manual, but make sure it's tight and that the holes line up for the split pin. Put the split pin in, preferably a new one, and all should be okay. It's always important that you look after your owner's manual. This contains all the information you need to know to run your engine. In particular, there is a page here showing the service schedule, when you should inspect items and when you should take your engine to your local dealer for servicing. Well, the first thing to check is the fuel. Most of our engines are designed with very reliable ignition systems, and the most common cause of an engine not starting is fuel, either fuel quality or quantity. If it is a small engine, such as this one here, it may be that the fuel in the tank is old. Always make sure you have fresh fuel in the tank. If the engine has not been run for a long period of time, the fuel may have evaporated away from the carburetor. Make sure the fuel tap is on, of course. If the engine won't start, but you can smell petrol, it will probably be flooded. The best thing to do is just to leave the engine for a few minutes to clear itself and then try again. If your engine is running rough, it may be due to the quality of the fuel or the quantity of the fuel. Also make sure that the vent on top of the tank is open. It may also be due to the engine overheating. Make sure that there is a proper water entry into the engine. There's no blockage on the water intakes. If it is actually putting out steam, it's best to stop the engine and to lift it and have a look to see if there's anything that's obviously wrong with the water intake. If your engine has come to a complete stop, the most likely cause is that it's run out of fuel. If so, just check that. It may also be due to something contacting the prop and stopping it from turning. Just lift the engine and make sure this is not the case. Clear anything that's obstructing it. If you find the engine is running correctly and revving, but the boat is not moving, despite putting the engine in gear, then it may be due to the prop shear pin having broken. To check this, first of all, make sure the engine is switched off, the kill cord is detached. Put the engine in gear and try turning the prop. If it does turn, then it means that the shear pin has broken. If you can, replace the shear pin. There is one supplied with the engine as a spare. This is best done by taking the engine off the back of the boat, bringing it into the boat to do that. Well, the most obvious thing here is that the kill cord is detached. Suzuki engines are very reliable, and we always make sure that owners are equipped with every bit of information they need. The best source of information if you have any problem with your engine is the owner's manual. Have a good look through there. There are lots of tips there about making sure that the engine runs correctly. If it doesn't, go to your local dealer with it and get it serviced. We believe that Suzuki produce the ultimate four-stroke outboard engines. We know that if you follow the straightforward maintenance schedules and information in your owner's manual, you will be able to enjoy your engine for years and years.